All right. Now I would like to introduce our next talk. So as a new to Cyber Summit, I'm sure one of the things on a lot of people's minds is, how do I get my first job in cybersecurity? So of course, we probably all know that that process probably involves things like resumes and filling out applications. And we do have a session on those coming up later today, but sometimes we overlook the importance of the first step in that process, which is finding the job postings in the first place. So I got to be honest with you, security job postings, they're often not good. The roles are ill-defined, the writing is unclear. Maybe most importantly, a lot of times they have inflated or unrealistic expectations on the part of employers. It can make it hard to understand exactly what some of these jobs really are and how to find the ones that best fit your background, your interests, and your skills. That's why I'm so happy to introduce our next presentation. Maureen Shrewsbury is a career placement specialist with the SANS Institute's Cyber Talent Program, and Bill Seaman is a senior technical recruiter at the industrial infrastructure security company Dragos, and they're here today to help you crack the code of cybersecurity job postings. Maureen, Bill, thanks.
Thanks for having us, David.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having us here. Definitely been excited to talk about this. I know Maureen and I have had lots of conversations about this over the last year.
Wonderful. So as David mentioned, we have heard a lot about the cybersecurity skills gap, and I'm sure many of the people that have graduated from recent programs or done boot camps hear everything about all the need in cybersecurity. But oftentimes when you're applying, as was mentioned, it can be really tough to understand what the job descriptions actually mean. So Bill here and I are going to discuss a little bit more about how to understand what goes into a job description and how that process works from behind the scenes so that you can better understand and hack that process. So I think we should jump right in and take advantage of over 20 years of experience that Bill has in the industry. And Bill, can you tell us a little bit about how a job description is created and who has input into what goes in?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is one area that, as was just stated, when you look for jobs, it's different everywhere. There's not a lot of consistency on that, and sometimes often very vague to do that. So it's really can come from a lot of different places. It can be as simple as some companies will search other companies' websites and kind of, take portions of it. Other times it's really developing, with the managers. I use a tool that, I ask them a series of questions to really understand what they want to do. But you have so many different perspectives that come into it where, they'll write a list of like, here's what I expect someone to come in and do, and just take it sometimes way too high level or way too, granular. It goes in either direction. That's why there's a lot of, it's very tough out there to do, because you read the descriptions and there's just so many input pieces. It's almost like when you're doing a resume where you get a lot of different advice from all your friends and everyone has an input. That really happens behind the scenes very often, where different people will chime in and have perspectives on it. So there's definitely a lack of consistency on that, of what goes into it often to do that. So it can definitely add those challenges when you're trying to apply and figure it out.
Okay, so given that there is so much variance into how the job descriptions are crafted, what should people look for when they're applying? Are there any red flags that they should be aware of? I think it was mentioned that there can be job roles where they ask for really broad descriptions, or it's an entry-level role that asks for 3 years of experience and a CISP. So what can people looking at job descriptions use to determine if it's the right fit for them?
I think you have to really take it as your job search of not just applying to apply on it, but I think understanding, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go kind of career wise, and try to understand a little bit about the company. Just, is that the right, facet? Are they doing the types of stuff that you do on that? And then I think you can take almost a broad approach to it, where you'll see a position, for example, and it may be a penetration tester on that. And it may have criteria that says, I need 8 years experience, 10 years experience at that. I would say if you want to go into penetration testing or that's your area, even if the leveling doesn't look correct, it's okay to apply on that and to really go through. And I think you want to really look at to make sure that your skills, either your current skills or the desired skills, line up with the direction of that role. I think that's the most important thing, versus is applied to the correct role, that's in the direction you want to go, that's with your current skills or desired skills to build on. If you tend to apply just all over, like I want to apply to 5 different jobs that are vastly because you could do it, it just sends a wrong message. So I think keeping that consistency of, yes, it might not look like I can do it, or it may look like it might be a little, higher level that they're looking for. But what people don't understand is behind the scenes what's really happening often. It could be a manager going, yes, I have a senior level role open, but really, do I need that? I really want someone who's maybe more moldable on my team and someone who can really take and grow into the role. Where I could be other times in the company going, I need someone who's very senior who can just jump in. I don't have time to really ramp them up. And that can actually change from time to time, month to month sometimes, in a fast moving or changing company. So sometimes it's luck and timing, but I think, you really have to, as long as it's the direction you go in, take the chance at pushing out your resume or applying.
Great. So you're saying don't self-select yourself out of a role because you
Right.
don't know
Do not
necessarily.
self-select yourself out ever on that, because there's so many facets that happen. I had someone the other day, I read a great tweet, someone who tweeted about an interview, and they said, I applied to the job. I don't have a lot of depth of experience. And to my surprise, I was given a phone call and I had an interview with the recruiter and then the manager. And, I don't think it ended up turning into anything, but at the end of the day, it was a good experience, a good connection and contact, to go through, and it could, down the road on that. So sometimes, again, you don't know what we may be looking for. We may be really focusing on diversifying the team. We may look to, create more entry level roles, or more senior. So when we put a job out there, I know it's often the case I've had where I have a lot of latitude, in what I look for in different dynamics, and I want to have those conversations. So I'm currently trying to hire a recruiter for myself, and literally I put a targeted ad out, but I've cast a net and talked to a wide variety of people because I know the different experiences that could be beneficial. So a candidate's not always going to know that. So I think sometimes it's best to take the chance on it.
Wonderful. And so I know that there's multiple ways that job descriptions can be put out. So they can be put out on LinkedIn, Indeed, on the company website. But one thing that seems to be pretty standard is the use of applicant tracking systems, which is something that not a lot of applicants know about. So can you talk a little bit about what an ATS or applicant tracking system is and how it's used by recruiters?
Yeah, absolutely. So our applicant tracking systems are what we live in every single day. And oftentimes managers have access to it. And, it's a great tool to quickly communicate back and forth. And of course, for us to keep track of everything. But what often people don't understand is, it could be, they have screeners sometimes built into those where your resume may never hit a person if they've set it up where it's going off keywords or other elements on that. So you want to make sure your resume is optimized. It's using the industry language, so you're not self-selected out. But also, it displays, every position you've applied to and, in the different ones. So managers have access, recruiters do, and it's great to apply to different ones and, sometimes apply more than once on it. But because we have visibility into it, if someone does come in and apply to 5 different roles, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes that type of applicant gets selected out, right away because someone just looks at that as they're not quite sure where they're going yet. And if they're not sure, I'm not sure. So we're going to pass on that. So I think it's, really important that you, target it again, pick that one, but understand that these systems do track everything from all the emails and all the communications. So you want to, again, use it wisely. And sometimes it's good when someone does apply again to show, interest on that. It's okay to apply again or down the road. And don't give up or be discouraged because one time you may not have heard back or not gotten the results you wanted. Because again, with those systems, it can be around timing. Sometimes you just have such an overwhelming response. And I had a position recently I put out there. I had over 400 applicants to it. There's just no way when I have 30 other positions I'm working on, I can always go through all 400, especially when you start going through those and you have more coming in on a daily basis of that. So sometimes you have really great people who aren't, always looked at that time. So again, reach back out and don't hesitate to apply again.
Great. And you mentioned that keyword optimization, to use in the standard industry language. So oftentimes we'll see those easy apply buttons on Indeed and LinkedIn and other forums. Do you recommend that people use those, or would you recommend a more tailored approach?
I do recommend a more tailored approach. Now, we set those up for a strategic reason on there, just because in certain industries and areas, people will self-select themselves out if they have to do an extra step. And we want to try to make it as easy as possible. So, we can get the candidates and make an evaluation. But honestly, I think, you're better off taking, if it is a position that you want, if it is, in an industry and area, you've done your due diligence, I think you want to show that, and that's with, putting a cover letter out there that is tailored to, that company, not a generic one on there. That's really important to do, and make sure, again, applying to that role, that specific role, but not just, kind of widely or just using the easy apply. The more information that you can provide on the front end often is very helpful.
Great. And what is some information that you would recommend not including in an application package? I know sometimes people have the idea that they'll just send everything they have to help. So what would you say don't include? Sometimes I've heard don't include a picture for EEO reasons. Or
Yeah,
so what else
so
would you say?
absolutely. So, and one other thing I just want to mark on the easy apply thing too, that sometimes people don't understand is those don't always go right into the applicant tracking system. They can go to a recruiter's inbox. And depending on how that's managed, sometimes that can get buried. So it's good because we try to manage it, but realize it's not always going right into the system where managers can have a first look at it. So easy apply is great, but it's not always the first step or the best step to take on that. And then, things I think not to include on the resume, again, pictures, again, for those reasons, it's just not customary necessarily here. We don't want to have any discrimination. You don't want any biases that are automatically built in. I wish people didn't always have those. They didn't have those, but they do. So I tend to try to keep stuff net neutral on those. And as far as even associations and clubs and things like that, if they can be deemed as controversial or, something like that, you may or may not. I mean, it's up to you. It's a very individual choice, but understand that, it could be self-selecting out if someone sees like either religious or political affiliations that may not be as popular to the recipient on that. And again, those are just initial factors that obviously should play no part in it, but people are human, they will look at those. So I would say, unless it has to be there, I would keep it more neutral on things.
Great, thank you. So after someone has applied using that easy button or hopefully that tailored resume, which you just recommended, what happened to the resume? And what happens if they're working with a recruiter already? Maybe a recruiter reached out and asked them to apply versus what happens if they apply just via a job board?
Oh, so you mean like through an agency or something?
Yeah.
So yeah, good. The biggest thing is full disclosure on that too. You just make sure you're transparent really about that. If you have applied directly and then you're working with a third party and someone reaches out as well, make sure that you let them know that you have applied already on there. Just because what will often happen is they'll reach out and then there could be the agency may reach out on your behalf as well, or there could be a conflict over, when did they get the resume, who got it first and such. So the biggest thing is just transparency on that. Definitely utilize any resources that you can. because it is often, the end game is really, you want to make sure your resume is seen either by the recruiter or by the hiring manager. And sometimes that third-party recruiter can be very helpful to get it right in front of the place, in front of the right person, or to the top of the stack when utilizing. So it's definitely a great avenue. But if you've already applied, you want to make sure you let them know that as well.
Great. And oftentimes we see that networking is really one of the best ways to get in front of an opportunity. So if someone identifies a job description they're really interested in and then reaches out to a hiring manager or a recruiter, what are some things that can help them stand out? And what are some things that they should potentially avoid?
Yeah, no, great question. I think oftentimes it's not just about applying and hoping. Sometimes you have to take that extra step through some networks, and it can be some silly stuff, such as there's an info or a career email to the general public, to the general, company. And you just don't know who's monitoring that. In our case, that's monitored by our whole HR staff to come through, and we'll get people online who will, they'll send an email to that and just say, hey, I applied to this, or they, have a simple question. I wouldn't send an email and say, I just applied, I want to verify you got it. But reaching out to that oftentimes with a good question, what happens is it is monitored, and that means we'll respond. And oftentimes we'll respond. We try to, at least at our company. Not everyone always does, but what it does at the very minimal, it makes me go into the applicant tracking system and probably pull up your information if I received an email from you. And you just got around the first hurdle, you got looked at. And I think that's the key. So sometimes doing that works. Other times, I think pre-application or very early on, you could reach out to someone in the company. I've used that. Do I have a connection on LinkedIn, or can I make one? Do I reach out to someone maybe on that team? And again, ask questions about the role, ask questions about maybe the company culture at a really high level on it. And you can express, hey, I'm very interested in applying, and make that contact. That's all really good. I think there's touch points on that of sending an email out. But again, it's about limitation and balance, because it can go south very quickly the other way, where I've seen it happen where someone's in the middle of an interview process and they're really excited about the opportunity, and they start connecting to all the team members and requesting LinkedIn, connections. And the reception of that isn't always as positive, because it puts the interviewers in awkward positions, because oftentimes as part of the interview process, it's team members on the team who will also interview the candidates. And I've heard the feedback over and over where like, oh God, they've, one person's fine, but they get at teams talk, and, this person's now, requested everyone, and I don't know how to respond. I don't know if I should accept it right now, or it kind of makes me feel like I'm in an awkward situation, becomes, a little too much, or, too much kind of follow up. I would say make a couple connections, express interest in applying. You could maybe email out and do some touch points. But once you're into that process, step back and let the process play out.
Great. And so we have a couple of questions that I also want to address from the Slack. So thank everyone for reaching out. So we hear a lot about recruiters being really helpful. How would you, if you are new to cyber, how would you reach out to a recruiter? Would you look for a specific company and then try and find them on LinkedIn? Are there ways to do that alternatively? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn's definitely a good place. Sometimes email. Oftentimes, recruiters. I know I just personally, when I have time, I love to talk to people and even set up a conversation and open to it. A lot of times it's really how you ask of that. And sometimes it's as simple as really just asking and putting that out there. As recruiters, the career recruiters I know who stay in this game for a long time, we do it because we love to help people. We love to make good matches on that and to help guide people through their careers. That's why I stay in this for 21 years. And so, reach out and even ask, just say, hey, do you have a few minutes? I'd love to pick your brain, or, I really want to go down this avenue and I'd love some advice on this. We love to talk. That's why we do what we do. So, when we have time, often it never hurts to ask. And I think that's often a good way of doing that. And you can do it through the career sites, through LinkedIn, other tricks, which isn't really tricks, but if you know who the person is, you don't have their emails, but let's be honest, we all know how email domains are typically set up, and people use, different things, first initial, last name, or however it is. Feel free to take a chance and send out an email. Even if it bounces back, it's typically just to get through. LinkedIn is great, but I have to say, in my case, I have a lot of contacts. I have probably 7,000. I can get hundreds of messages that get buried, and I can't always respond timely. So again, sometimes persistence is good too. Again, it's about moderation. Follow back up again, send another email on it. Don't hesitate to do that. If you send 20 now, it might be a whole lot, but if you send a second one, oftentimes it's like, it makes us think, oh shoot, sorry, I dropped the ball, I didn't follow up. Let me make sure it's a priority. But any method you can, I think, trying to make the connection. Again, when you ask for help, helpful people will typically take some time, take a few minutes, and especially in this community. And I find this really unique in cyber. Like you said, I've been doing this 21 years, all sorts of industries. I found that this varies so much from any other area I've been in, because it is about community. It's really about, trying to take that fight, and you have to expand. We need to expand the base. We need to expand more people into it. So it's definitely, I find, very helpful where you have a lot of willing people to do so when you ask.
Thanks. I know that we're starting to wrap up a little bit, so I want to ask one or two final questions. So oftentimes, once you submit your application, you're just waiting and you may not get anything from a company. So behind the scenes, what happens to decide whether or not someone is recognized as appropriate for an interview? And then what type of timeframes should candidates expect?
Yeah, I wish there was some more consistency on this, because behind the scenes, it can vary from company to company, whether, it's only the recruiter going through those. And, I wish I could say every day I can go through applicants. Some days I'm interviewing all day and I can't. We have our managers also go into it. So behind the scenes, you have lots of people looking, and what they're looking at is trying to build a good candidate pool of well-rounded and varied experiences on that. So it's hard to judge, where do you stand in that as an applicant? Because what they're doing is just really looking at a few, trying to vary how many people I talk to and reach out to, and then, setting those things up, next steps and phone calls. So I would say it's, hopefully you hear something in a couple of days, and realistically within a few days. Sometimes it does take a week or two. But again, follow back up. If you haven't heard anything, feel free, in a week or two to, I would say, send an email out. Hey, I applied a week or so ago. I'm just curious on where we are in the process, because oftentimes these things happen in batches where, day one, I go through 50 resumes, awesome. And I'm screening and interviewing those over the next 2 weeks. And at the same time, more are piling up there. And then it's kind of how those pan out when you kind of go into the next batch. So, reaching out, following up are really helpful things. Again, you just want to be seen.
Great. And one final question, to be cognizant of the time, because I know that there's so many great topics covered today. So once someone is selected for that interview, I know you mentioned doing a little OSINT previously about identifying emails. What should they research about the company, and what should be covered during that first screening call to determine if they should move forward in the process?
Yeah. So I think in general, do your homework about the company. One of the general questions that usually gets asked, what do you know? And it can be, I've seen so many people knocked out at this phase. Hiring managers are like, look, they can't take the time to really spend to understand, I'm not interested. So do your research and understand, but also be humble about what you know, because what you know is only what's out there publicly. Because I've had it go the other way where someone is just like, I know everything about it. Well, again, I would say hit it in the middle. Here's from my understanding. I always use softer language on it. From my understanding, here's what I understand, and then look for that validation. And I think that should be. And then the other thing during that first interview should be covered. You really want to understand, the basics. What do you expect from the job? What are the expectations in general on it? A little bit, hopefully, about the company culture and feel. What is the style of it? Because it's got to be the right fit. And I think that's important. And then lastly, I cover salaries on very first conversations. And it's not really about pigeonholing on it, but it's really important to understand that no one wants to waste anyone's time. And I think, at the beginning, it's not saying it's going to be necessarily this dollar amount, but it's what ballpark am I in? Where's my comfort zone, or where am I targeting? Because the worst thing is when you get to the end of it, and I've had it as a candidate, I've gone to the end of a process and they come with an offer and I almost feel insulted, where you're like, oh, no, we're not even in the same, same field. So you want to make sure, I think, you hit those at the very beginning. High level, what do you expect out of the role? What is the team culture? Can I understand just, again, initially on that? And then are we playing in the same sandbox as far as salary or compensation?
All right. Thanks, Bill. This has been absolutely wonderful. I know you and I could talk about this all
All
day,
day.
but I know that there are probably some really great talks coming up. So I think we look forward to speaking with everybody in the Slack channel, and we'll let David take over.